Hey, welcome back to Next Third, Best Third. I'm David Fenwick, the founder and host. And today, if you're facing any kind of challenges in your life, if you're wondering, hey, is there still hope? Or there's things that are like mountains that you have to overcome and climb, today is going to be an amazing, amazing episode. This is an episode about overcoming challenges, about not quitting, about triumph, and about redemption. And this morning, I've got a good friend of mine, Dawn Adkins. Dawn,
Hi.
welcome.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
glad to have you here. For many of you who've been following, you have seen me with Ron Atkins. Ron has been on about 4, 5, 6 times now. And this is his wife, Dawn. And Dawn, you have probably one of the most amazing stories that I've ever heard. And I would just like for you just to start telling us about yourself.
Thank you. It's a incredible journey for sure. I spent 26 years of my life struggling in addiction through a series of events through my childhood and early years, going through some trauma. I turned to drugs and alcohol to medicate the pain. I didn't know what to do with that. And through that medication, I lost my kids and, ended up just living in the streets and as a homeless prostitute, selling my body, just to be able to survive for many years in my life.
Wow.
Pretty hopeless.
Yeah.
Not knowing what to do with my life. I went to about 16 drug rehabs. I was desperate. I wanted hope. I wanted to change. And I would go to these rehabs and I would graduate the program, but then within, just a couple of days, I'd be right back, to where I started from. Nothing was changing. I'm approximately 46 felonies.
46 felonies.
Yes, I was in and out of jail, and back and forth, and I just couldn't get it. I grew up with learning disabilities, and I was always told, bad kid, bad kid. I've always had this violent tendency on the inside of me, and I just didn't know what to do with all that energy, and so finally in 2005, I was arrested for the last time with 5 of my last felonies and taken to jail and facing probably 25 years to life.
Goodness.
And, I kept telling God, I'm like, even as a little child, I've always believed in God. I just didn't know how to be a church lady.
Right. Okay.
And through my experiences, I couldn't see myself like that.
Right.
I wanted it, and I knew that God was with me. I just didn't know how to cross over.
Right.
And so my last arrest, I was hogtied and taken into solitary confinement and suicidal and demon-possessed and all the things that go with 26 years of addiction. And, I sat in that prison cell and I just said, God, if you're real, change me. Show me, that you're real. If you can love me, if you love me, help me to learn to love myself. Help me, to change my life.
Right.
And I had an encounter with God, and I've never been the same.
So you started very young, right?
I did.
On the addictions and the medicating the pain from your childhood, right?
Mm-hmm. I started probably around the age of 13 years old.
Okay.
Just drinking and doing, drugs in school. And at a young age, I lost my husband in a car accident, and that kind of sent me over the edge. I had a young child, and I didn't know what to do with that pain, and that's where my addiction started.
Sure. You said that you grew up with a knowledge of God, right? Always knowing that there was a God and everything, and not knowing how to be a church lady. I think that's funny, but it's so true, right? Because we have this idea so many times that we reduce faith to this role, right?
Yeah.
This is what it looks like if I am, quote unquote, living by faith. But it has nothing to do with that role, or very little, right?
Right. Well, I had encountered legalism.
Yeah.
I had encountered religion, but I had never encountered the love of God.
Right.
And that's what changed my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday, and we were just talking about the very thing. The command says, love others as you love yourself.
Yes.
And that's a beautiful truth. It's a beautiful statement. It's a beautiful concept. But what if you don't love yourself?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I know I struggled with that for years and years and years.
Sure.
I could love you. I could love other people. But loving myself
Sure.
was very difficult. I'm sure that was something that you wrestled with.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even know who I was.
Yeah.
I didn't even know my favorite color. All I
Wow.
knew was survival, at that point. And I tell people all the time, one encounter with his love can change everything.
Yeah.
And that at 40 years old in solitary confinement in a straitjacket is where that happened. My experiences, I call it the shame, fear, control cycle.
Shame, fear, control?
Yes, it comes out of Genesis chapter 3.
Okay.
Right? And that, all of the shame that I had experienced caused me to have a fear of someone seeing who I really am.
Right.
Which caused me to try to control that through addiction, through anger, through being tough, all these different, things. And when I began to encounter his love, it began to heal all those places and all those experiences and gave me a whole new belief system about myself and about others.
Wow, that's so good. With Next Third, Best Third, one of our big messages is that we, are trying to fight areas of decay. And those areas of decay are cognitive, physical, your relationships, your emotion. But the fifth one is the spiritual. And with that are things more like shame, guilt, regret, things like that. And those things are the things that we've carried into our adulthood.
Sure.
So many of the people that I deal with on a daily basis, mostly are men, right?
Sure.
But they're these guys who they've been successful, a lot of them.
Sure.
They're at the pinnacle of their careers. They've been married for years, and yet they're still struggling with this guilt and the shame, this regret that was imposed upon them, right? From pain at a very, very young age, and they've never been able to deal with it.
Sure. And I think forgiveness is huge. Forgiving others and then forgiving yourself, was the biggest, just the biggest turning point in my life. Is, it's who am I,
Right.
And so that really has been life-changing.
Yeah. So you encountered this love of God
I did.
in a straitjacket.
I did. I was actually cussing and screaming and hopeless.
Yeah.
And, I didn't want to live anymore. That's why I was there. And I just told God, I'm like, why do you keep resurrecting me from the dead? I went through so much trauma in my addiction, living in the streets. I'd been stabbed. I'd been raped, over and over and over again. And I just didn't want to live anymore.
Right.
I had zero desire. And I couldn't understand why God kept resurrecting me from the dead, from overdoses, just time after time. And I thought there must be something different, what is your purpose in this? And through that, I just was crying out to God, and I'm like, if you really love me and you're really real, then show me, change me. If you'll change me, I'll spend the rest of my life helping people like myself.
Wow.
Yeah, and he did. And I had this encounter and his love, and I just, it's indescribable.
Yeah.
I kept saying, why am I always in a straitjacket, in and out of rehab, in and out of jail, in and out of mental hospitals, all these labels and diagnoses and medication, and none of it worked. And I just like, why am I always in a padded room? And I just heard this voice say, because you're valuable,
Wow.
I've put you in a safety deposit box. And it shifted my identity. Just that one word, from God shifted my identity forever.
Yeah.
And for the first time in my life, I felt valuable. And I'm like, me, I'm valuable. And I just had this vision of myself as a little girl. And I could see where he has been with me throughout my whole life, protecting me, and keeping me from the really bad decisions that I made, out of my experiences. And it just wrecked me.
Yeah.
It's wrecked me forever.
That's amazing, because when people hear your story, because it is so dramatic, right? And you've been through so much, the perspective that you probably had for a long time, and I'm sure people listening to you is like going, what do you mean God was with you that whole time, right?
Yeah.
Because look how horrible your life experience was, but yet you got that perspective where you could actually see that he was with you, even despite all the struggles.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I look back and I remember times that I was walking the streets, homeless and addicted and hungry. And some family would be coming home from church and stop and pick me up and rent a hotel room for a week and buy me groceries out of nowhere. And I couldn't understand why they were being nice to me. And then they'd say, well, can we pray for you? And I'm like, sure, but I felt so unworthy, and I see God's hand in my life through the whole time. I was stabbed multiple times. I was, raped and left for dead, and he just kept resurrecting me and, healing me through it to even be able to, be at that point in my life. And it's just been incredible.
Yeah. Ever since we met and we became friends, the word that I always think of when I think of you is redemption.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just to see the redemptive love and the redemptive power of God in your life has been so encouraging, because I know that's what you have brought into with intentionality these last 10 years or so of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell people all the time that if there's breath in your body, there's hope for your soul.
That's so good.
And I was hopeless, and he is hope, and it's been an incredible journey, and it's been almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
And I had no idea what this was going to look like, and just, crying out. And, I had a lot of questions about, well, what about this? And I would look back and it would be something that happened to me through my bad decision. And, and out of my brokenness. But when I looked at the experience on the other side of it, he brought me through.
Yeah.
I always say, not even smelling like smoke, right?
Not a smell of smoke on you. You came through the fire.
And he would bring me through, even though I put myself in a bad situation and might have experienced something very negative or hard. I came on the other side of it stronger than I was before I experienced it.
Yeah. And I'm sure you had, as you said, you had no clue what it was going to look like. Right?
Yeah.
Once you had this encounter with God, there is no way you could have ever imagined your life as it's gone forward, right?
No, I was literally 40 years old, sitting in confinement in a straitjacket. The worst, the lowest, the worst place you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so now what?
Right.
I come into prison as a homeless prostitute. I was probably the most irresponsible person on the face of the earth. I had lost my 3 children due to my addiction, which tormented me, and that I had chosen drugs and addiction over everything that was important to me, and I just couldn't see how I could possibly be loved or love myself.
Wow.
But through that encounter in his love, I began to see how he created me. Mm-hmm. I began to see the counterfeits that I walked in, and what the real was. I was extremely violent, and
it's so hard for me to picture that.
I was extremely violent, and I was robbing and stealing and kicking doors in and putting guns to people's heads, and I just I'm like, how do I forgive myself for those things, that I did? And I began to see that I was walking in the counterfeit for what I was created for.
Right.
And and it's kind of funny, but like I felt like God told me, you're going to trade in your Glock for a sword.
Okay.
And we're going to kick in doors, but they're going to be doors of the enemy. We're going to kick in doors of shame. We're going to kick in the doors of unforgiveness. We're going to go back and share what I'm doing in your life for those that are still, held hostage, that are still in bondage. And it kind of turned all of that bad into giving me a completely different perspective of what my life is all about.
Wow. It's truly, I mean, like say, redeeming your life, turning what was horrible into something so beautiful and powerful, right? And bringing hope. And it's the message of hope that you carry that stirs me up so much, right? The men that follow us and that I minister to on a daily basis, so many of these guys, not as extreme obviously as you, but they're at a place where they need hope. I reach out to a lot of men who, as I say, they're in a place in their life where they're going, man, is this all there is? I've missed it. I've reached this point and my life seems empty, or that kind of thing, full of regret and shame. And what you're bringing is, hey, no, this could be amazing, right? We talk about next third being the best third. Well, it can be the best third if you buy in.
Right? And I mean, we all have prisons. What I mean? We all, have had our own bondages, whether it's that extreme or not. It's extreme for us, what I mean? It's hurtful and it's a place of brokenness, but there's nothing too hard for God.
Well, you just said that we all have prisons. I mean, that is that hits home for so many of us. I think about where God has brought me through, especially even in the last 6-7 years, where I thought there was no hope for me, to now where I am is just full of hope, not just for myself, but for others. But you embody that, right? I mean, and you come against shame.
Oh, yeah.
Ron told me one time
shame
that you're the shame assassin. I love it.
And I think it's because I've come out of so much shame. Like, I'm not afraid to hit it head on. It's kind of funny, that violent tendency I always had is to assassinate shame.
Wow.
And God gave Ron a name, Mephibosheth, and he's like, well, why do you call her that? And it's, it literally means shame assassinator.
Wow.
And that is, I guess, if you say anything, it's to, confront anything that comes between, you and the love that God has for you. And shame always tries to do that.
Always does that, right? It tries to keep you away from the reality, the truth. Of who God declares you to be.
Your identity.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, God even gave me a scripture, and it was, the kingdom suffers violence and the violent take it by force. And it changed that bad girl into, no, you've come from the front lines of the demonic, which was the counterfeit of, you're coming to the front lines to advance the kingdom. And instead of thinking I was a bad person that was broken and that violent tendency on the inside of me was, that I was a bad girl, was God said, I put that there. And I put that courage there, and I put that boldness there for you to kick down the doors that the enemy, tries to hold people back with.
So let's use that as a segue, right? So here you are, you've get this encounter with God, you start to see yourself rightly. What happened next? Bring us along from that point to kind of where you are now.
Well, I began having this prayer life. I didn't know that you could have a relationship with God, and I didn't know that was a thing. I knew about him. I didn't know you could know him. And I spent 4 months just talking, to God, and I'm like, so what are we going to do now? So you've brought me this far, and obviously you've saved me from my own choices for a purpose. And I just felt like God said, I want you to be what you need the most. And I'm like, okay. And the cycle that I lived in was, I would go into being incarcerated, I would go into a rehab, or I'd be in jail, or I'd be in a a mental hospital and I could do it there. But when I got out, I had to go back to the streets and survive to get a hotel room or do what I had to do to try to survive again. And what I needed was a safe environment to be able to continue what God would always begin to start in me, through those times of rehabs or incarceration. And so I'm like, okay. And God gave me this vision to have homes for women like myself. Wow. The worst of the worst. I like the bad girls. I like the ones that people think don't stand a chance. They're my favorites.
Wow.
Yeah. And just like myself, solitary confinement just put me there. I want to go with the ones that don't even want to talk about God.
Right.
I want to go to the hardest of the hard.
So you told me before, and I think you mentioned it earlier about, you started about age 13 on this track. You weren't a good student. You had learning disabilities and everything. But you are a published author. You've got degrees. I mean, what happened there?
Yeah, so that's a huge part of my testimony is I grew up with severe learning disabilities. It was bad kid, can't sit still, always disrupting the classroom. When I ended up in prison, they did an evaluation, found out I had Asperger's, and always super medicated because they wanted to keep me calm and keep me quiet. And I'm always acting out. And during that time in prison, they explained to me what Asperger's was, and I was on the spectrum, which made perfect sense of why I acted out. I'm super sensitive. And the Lord just began to show me that that's the counterfeit for being sensitive to the things of the Spirit. Okay. My 5 senses were heightened. And God put it on my heart to go to school and to learn the Word of God. Well, I didn't do well in school. I quit school pretty much at 15 years old and got a barber's license. And I was like, oh, God, I don't want to go to school. I can't understand the Bible. I don't know what this looks like. I know what you're telling me, but, it was a very scary place for me. Sure. And so as I did my time in prison, God began to give me a hunger for the Word and the ability to learn like never before. Just like I got this supernatural downloads, and I'm like, wow. And just to be able to lean into the Spirit and hear from the heart of God. I got heart knowledge. Head knowledge was not my thing. And through that heart knowledge, it began to give me understanding of the Word. And I went and prayed for a girl in prison one day. And I was always in a pill line. And God told me that day that I prayed for that girl, He said, you'll never take another psychotropic medication. And He literally healed me. I was diagnosed with bipolar schizophrenia. I had all these labels and things that I believed about myself and never thought that my mind could be integrated from multiple personalities and from those lies to be able to live, not being on medication and live a healthy, serene, peaceful life. Right. And today I'm on no medication. And I actually went to Bible college upon first year to the day. A year from the day I was released from prison, went back to Bible college and got a PhD in theology and a master's in biblical counseling.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the ADHD might be there some, but it just helps me to multitask in what I do and all my many jobs.
And you need to multitask.
Yes, yeah, it might still be there, but that's okay. I've learned to live with it.
That's right. That's been redeemed too.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So you went there, and now you're a doctorate, right, or a master's?
Yeah, I got a doctorate in theology and a master's in biblical counseling, and God gave me a vision to have homes for women like myself, and so I knew I didn't understand why I went back to school, other than I just wanted to be able to teach people, the real and be authentic in it.
Right.
I think the authentic testimony is what changes lives, right?
Sure.
And just being real. And so I wanted to learn the Word to be able to share that with other people. And 9 months after my release from prison, God birthed this ministry through me.
That's amazing.
And it is amazing because it's only by His grace
Only,
that
right?
happened.
I mean,
Right?
only. But, one of the things in a very practical way for you to get that doctorate and that master's, a lot of people can look at us and or look at somebody and say, well, she's overcome a lot. But we're talking about a very practical thing that was an impossibility, right? And I think a lot of us need to look at that and say, hey, if it happened with you, if God did this in your life, and I'm sure this happens with the women you minister to,
Sure. Yes.
they look at you and say, oh my gosh, because they can identify with you 100%, right?
Sure.
So it gives them some real, not just hope, but it's like, hey, that's a stake in the ground. I can get there.
Sure. And He's a God of reconciliation.
Yeah.
And when He opens doors, it's amazing. It's even going to Bible college was such a blessing, but it was such a miracle because the day I went and signed up for Bible college, I didn't realize it, but it was my 1-year anniversary from being released from prison.
Yeah.
And as I went to this big school that was so intimidating for me, I went, and it was lunch, and the registrar was not in. And the chancellor of the school happened to open the door and let me in and brought me in his office. And as I went to write the check to pay for school, I had saved and saved. I realized it was a year from the day I was released, and I began to cry. And as I was sitting there weeping in his office, he said, would you like to tell me what's going on? And as I shared the testimony of my testimony and just being released, he ripped my check up and gave me a full ride scholarship to get a PhD. And it was just God in the whole thing, but it was that courage to be obedient, to step out, even though everything inside of me felt like I couldn't. I believed the promise, which means royal declaration. Right?
And you're making me cry here.
I believed the promise that God gave me, and I just did it anyway. I did it scared, and that's what happened.
Wow. We talk so much in Next Third, Best Third about having an honest appraisal of your life and living with intentionality. Yeah. But that the bridge you have to cross there is the bridge of fear.
Yes.
You have to be vulnerable, and you have to face your fears. And that's exactly what you did. I mean, you stepped in fully. I mean, you just said, I'm going in, despite all the fear. And despite the reality that you shouldn't be able to do this.
Right. Well, what I always tell myself is, if you can kick doors in and put guns to people's head, you can kick this door in and go in with your sword and knock this out.
That's so great.
If God tells you to do it, just do it.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So tell us about the homes that you have. How many and where are they?
So 9 months out of prison. I had no money. I'm a barber, so I worked 2 jobs, and I saved up money, and I rented a house. Had no idea what I was doing. Absolutely no idea. But what I did know is that I had to go back. And that's always been the cry of my heart is, God, if you're really real and you'll set me free, I want to spend the rest of my life telling people how real you are. I want to tell people about the cross. And He's real. And I do, And so from the time I came out of prison, I've wanted to go back. And I've been passionate. And I started this house. I rented a house. It was a dump. It was such a shack, and I just did it. And it's just been a supernatural journey. I worked in a barber shop, and I just told everybody about what God had done, everybody about my vision, what God was doing. And He began just to give me favor, with people and ministries and in the community. And we just did it. I started taking girls out of prison. And I had no idea what I was doing. We just did it, and I believed God, and He taught me. I found out I needed what was called a board of directors and a 501c3. Sure. I spent 26 years addicted to drugs. I knew nothing about that. I didn't even know how to turn on a computer. And I just did it, and I hand wrote everything, and He brought people around me to help me to learn how to do it. I call them the eagles that He's brought in my life to help me, go higher. And that was 2007.
Okay.
We started. And we have grown. I started in Panacea, Florida. We went from Panacea, we opened a house in Tallahassee. When I was released from prison, I did not go back to Daytona Beach, where I had lived on the streets as a prostitute. I went back to Tallahassee, where my children and my family was, and I spent the next few years there building a solid foundation and starting ministry.
That's so great.
When I graduated Bible college, the Lord told me, he said, I'm sending you back to your rebellious nation. And upon my graduation from Bible college, I got my PhD and I went back to Daytona Beach and I started the ministry there. And it just blew up. Not only did I have homes for women, but we have ministries in strip clubs. We minister in the streets. I have a heart for the homeless. I spent years homeless. I love going back in the strip clubs that I used to work in and just leaving love stains on the ladies' hearts and just letting them know that, hey, I'm not in here to, try to, preach at you, but I'm here to love you and tell you that if you ever need anything, to call me. And we put prayer boxes in there and they put their prayers in and we take their prayers. We'd pull ice chests with bologna sandwiches, ham sandwiches, and bottled water up and down the streets of the red light district and just feed anybody and pray for people that wanted the same streets I came out of, which brings a huge level of trust to those that
Yes.
I sat in crack houses with or sat in trap houses with, and just love it. That has blown up, and through having different ladies in our program, we now have a house in Florida. We have 2 homes in Indiana. They're called the Remnant. One of the girls that came through my program, we call her Lazarus. Jesus literally raised her from the dead. Flew her. I was preaching in Indiana and met some family members there that took me to Jessica, and Jessica decided to come to Florida and turn her life around, and she did. And we call her Lazarus. He raised her from the dead, restored her marriage, brought her back to Indiana, and man, God is using her. She's killing it. She has 2 homes in Indiana, and it's just incredible seeing what God can do, and when he transforms a life. And what's happening right now is really funny, and it's happening in our homes all over, is we have this favor with the judicial system.
Really? Really?
And we're sitting with these judges and people, the city officials, and in the past 6 months, I have 2 ladies that have been court-ordered to new life that were facing life sentences. And now I'm going to cry. 7 months ago, I was called and asked if I would be willing to take a 17-year-old that was facing 99 years in prison. And I went and did a service at the jail and met this young lady, and she had 0 intentions of coming to our program. She was very hard, she was very hurt, she was very broken and very addicted. And the Lord set her free. Wow. And she was court-ordered to our home instead of a 99-year, 10 to 99-year prison sentence. And that is a miracle.
So the judicial system itself is recognizing the work that you're doing and saying, hey, this is valid. We need to partner with you.
They're seeing what God is doing in the lives of these ladies. It's not just a temporary fix, but it's a lasting fruit. It's lasting transformation in their lives. Yeah. It's been incredible. It's been incredible. Over the last 16 years, we have a 100% success rate in our 1-year graduates from our program. And I don't mean that every girl that comes makes it, because that's not true. But every girl that comes and graduates from at least a year of being in our program has not returned to addiction
or to prison. That's phenomenal.
It's God.
Yeah.
Only God does that.
That is a miracle, right?
Yes.
There's no way that humanly you can make that
No,
happen.
and that's what they're seeing. They're seeing, hey, I court ordered this girl instead of a 25-year prison system, and now she has a hair salon in our community, and it's changing lives through that. And it's incredible what God has done and what he is doing.
Wow. Wow. It just blows my mind. I've had the honor of meeting some of your girls over the years, right? And seeing their lives and seeing when I see them, they're just full of joy. And again, I know that not everyone that I met over these years has stayed with the program, but the ones who have and graduated, I'm always so encouraged.
Oh, man. Yeah. They're killing it.
Yeah.
God is just using, I could just tell story after story after story about their lives, watching where they come from. Like, I have sisters that grew up homeless, no water, no electricity, very little education. And they've come in the program one of them she had been to prison 3 times by 21.
Wow.
And came out of prison, came to our program, got a GED in prison, taught her how to read and write. She got a master's degree in biblical counseling, became a missionary over in Africa, worked with Heidi Baker. And now she just adopted her niece, and now she's a mom.
That's crazy.
Only God does that. You do know her.
I know her.
Yes,
yeah.
You do know her. And then I got her sister, who too grew up, and those generational curses have been broken off their life, off their bloodline.
Yeah.
And her sister came and she got set free, and her son were, just healed and set free. And now, their lives have been changed. Yeah. And, God is just working through their lives. And it's just incredible, the stories and the testimonies of his goodness and his kindness and his grace.
It's so great.
Yeah.
As I said, I started this saying your story, but it really is God's story.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
God's story, right? And being able to brag on him. I know you do that wherever you go.
I can't help it.
You can't help it.
Yeah.
You just brag on the goodness of God,
yes.
and I love that.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to put some links at the bottom of this podcast, right?
Yes.
Radical Restoration.
Yes.
What's the website?
It's radicalrestorationministries.com.
And if people are interested, they can give there?
They can give
support,
there.
So that would be great. And your book, what's the title of your book? I'm going to put that on there.
Everything I have is Radical Restoration.
Radical Restoration, that's the name of the book.
Yes,
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so amazing, Dawn. This is so great. We're gonna.
Thank you.
I could just sit here forever, but this testimony is. I hope you're encouraged. No matter what you're facing, there's hope.
Yes.
No matter what you're facing, there's a chance, right?
Yes.
And God has been so good, and I just encourage you, today that if this has affected you, share this with somebody else.
Yes.
Hit the subscribe and the like button, but we want to get these messages of hope, these inspirational messages of God, his goodness out to as many as possible. Yes. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.